Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Shefali Kapadia. I am a business journalist and the writer of the Inside Lane newsletter. We've got a great panel of experts here to talk about truck driver retention and recruiting today. Joining me are Lewie Pugh, Vice President of the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, Lindsey Trent, President of Next Generation in Trucking Association, and Robert Pierson, VP of Driver Recruiting at Mesilla Valley Transportation. Thank you all for being here today. I think we'll just jump right in since we've got a lot to talk about here. What do you all see as the biggest barrier to attracting young people in trucking today? And Lindsey, I'll start the conversation off with you. What are you seeing as a big barrier to this?
Honestly, I really think that younger people, Gen Z, they're interested in learning, but they need industry engagement in order to learn about the industry. So I think a big barrier is them just not knowing. And that's one of the reasons why we created Next Gen, is because we want to help the industry to get involved with their schools and their community, to introduce young people to the concept that the trucking industry might be a good career path for them. But we can't just let students know. We also have to educate parents and educate teachers and administrators and people who influence education and start building relationships with them. There is a really great study that recently came out, and out of 1,000 students with no industry involvement, if 250 consider a career in trucking, then 25 will enter the industry. But with industry involvement, if the same amount consider a career in trucking, well, 85 will enter the industry. So it takes industry involvement to really help young people know about the trucking industry and learn about the trucking industry. Now, that's my kind of pie in the sky. I think that Lewie has some great insights from the owner-operator side of things.
Well, Lewie, would love to hear your take. What are you seeing as the big barriers to trucking recruitment these days?
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Lindsey said as far as industry engagement. And of course, at OOIDA, we represent not only small business carriers, but we also represent employee drivers. And we haven't done a good job. And I mean, I've been in the trucking industry since 1994, and we haven't done a good job from before then on. We've talked about there's all kinds of jobs here. I mean, I remember in high school, all kinds of jobs, but we haven't done much to make this an appealing profession or a better profession than what it was when I started. And you know, in terms of the problems with pay, the problems with parking, the problems with the amount of time and hours that are given away as shippers and receivers, and just all these other things. I like what Lindsey, there's not a good place for people to go learn about trucking or learn what's a part of it. I mean, I jokingly say, which is kind of true, I always wanted to become a trucker after I watched Smokey the Bandit as a little kid. But there's a lot that they left out of that movie when it comes to what trucking really is. And there's not a trucking for dummies or anything like that. And if, you know, I tell people you can join OOIDA and we can help you, educate you, but they first have to know about OOIDA. And so, again, there's lots of things here, but I think that come into this for sure.
And I think, too, I mean, they don't just need to know about OOIDA, but they need to know what an owner-operator is. Gen Z, they're very entrepreneurial, and we think that becoming an owner-operator is something that is going to attract Gen Z to our industry because they can be their own small business owner, but we have to educate them about the industry, educate them about being a professional driver, helping them get their start, and then give them the resources that in the future, down the road, after 3 to 5 years experience, that's when they can learn and become an owner-operator and be their own business owner, which I think is really going to excite Gen Z.
Yeah, that education component, super important. And obviously, Hollywood paints a different picture of things sometimes. Robert, what are you seeing in terms of barriers, in terms of your own recruiting, as well as just kind of industry large?
Twofold. One, from a younger demographic, we're viewed still as not being a quote unquote sexy job. There's about 3.8 million jobs in this country that require a secondary education that is not college. Plumbers, welders, electricians, pipe fitters, truck drivers. These jobs, after a year of education, pay more than the average household income. Now, you don't start out, though, making that kind of money. You have to pay your dues, be a student or an inexperienced driver. And like any of these other things with an apprenticeship program, once you get to that 1 year, 2 year, 3 year mark, you're making very attractive money. The challenge from our standpoint is the illusion of college. And I'm not dismissing college. Trust me, I want my doctor to go to college. I want my lawyer to go to college. With that said, college, especially at the price tag that comes with it at this time, is not the place to go find yourself. It is a place that you are going on a very specific career path because you're taking on that debt. One of the things that we have to do a better job is attracting people that are looking for their first career choice, not their second. We have seen a bit of a change post-COVID. The average age of a student in a trucking school pre-COVID was about 42 years old. That number is starting to come down into the mid-30s based off of the numbers that we're seeing. But it's still, you're getting somebody in their second career choice. You're getting somebody that didn't choose to go into this. They've lost a job, or their career path has changed, or something has gone wildly different. We have to do a much better job of taking pride in what we do. And I'll give you an example. I've consulted for about 40 carriers over the years. And one of the common things when I get to a larger group of a company together is I'll ask everybody, who here has somebody under the age of 18 in their family? And you'll see most people raise their hand. And I'll go, who here has suggested that they should go into trucking as an industry? And you'll see one or two hands out of a couple hundred. That is scary. And it's part of the position that we're in currently right now is if we can't get excited about our own industry, how do we expect it to come from any other place? Now, OOIDA, the ATA, Women in Trucking, as an example, they do a good job of being, in many respects, the mouthpiece for the organization. But it has to be also much more grassroots, where you're literally giving somebody career advice about, hey, this is why you want to get into this industry. I think some companies, right now, I recently attended the 10th Street Conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was interesting when it came to driver recruiting. It was a story of the haves versus the have-nots. Half the room really had most of their trucks filled. The other half of the room had about 5 to 8% open. And you will find that without getting into the technical stuff, the big difference to the two people was enthusiasm and passion and being able to sell, hey, this is what we do and this is why it's fun and it's cool and it has purpose. We have to do a better job overall collectively as an industry to where when I talk to 200 people, we don't have 1 to 2 people raising their hands. It should be at least half the room.
And Robert, is there anything that you've changed in terms of the messaging to younger applicants or, students that is sort of reversing that idea of what the trucking profession is and making it sexier, as we talked about?
Yeah, I will say this. I will tell you with millennials on down, they will be extremely loyal and hardworking remotely, which makes our job very attractive to those people. They are not necessarily interested in sitting in the physical office and being surrounded by a bunch of people. But on the flip side, they want to have a relationship. They want to be engaged. They want to have purpose and ultimately a pathway. Our industry is set for those people. We have a lot of different pathways. And if we sell it correctly, the younger demographic does get interested. We just have to get in front of their face with it.
Lindsey, are you seeing similar things in your line?
Yeah, I just can't agree with everything that you're saying and more, Robert. I met with an organization out of Ohio that is trying to invest in supply chain and trucking careers. And it's their kind of their workforce board. And they mentioned this about college, that in Ohio, 63.24% of high school graduates go to college. And within the first year, 32.9% are dropping out. I mean, that's kind of a lot, right? Yeah. So we have got to do a better job of going in there and educating them about other opportunities that aren't going to require a 4-year college degree where you're getting student loan debt and where you're coming out with a liberal arts degree making $30,000 to $40,000. And that is the reality. That's what studies are showing is what a liberal arts degree is making right out of college. Whereas if you're getting a skill set in trucking and the supply chain, you're going to be making more than that right out of college. So it's a lot about the narrative. It's a lot about educating, and it's a lot about really us as an industry getting involved in our community. If I have a trucking company and I have terminals in 6 states or 6 cities, I should be going to some of the schools in each one of those cities and talking to the students and taking a truck. How exciting would it be for students to be able to get inside the truck and actually see all of the technology, all of the really cool things that you can do with that truck? But they have to see it. And if they don't, they're just going to go look at the other industry that has been coming to talk to them.
And Lewie, do you see a lot of your organization's members kind of switching around their messaging, doing things that resonate with some of these younger generations, like Robert and Lindsey have mentioned, to kind of get them on board and excited about trucking careers?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of members who are family, and it's a family business, and they bring their kids come up in it, and their kids get involved and so on. You know, that's a great thing. We got 150,000 members. Probably 80% of our membership is owner operators. About 20% would be company drivers, but it's a family thing. There's a lot of family stuff involved in it. You know, the thing I would speak to, I mean, a lot of our members, though, will also speak to the problems in the industry and why they don't recommend for their children to come into this business. You know, as somebody, I started driving truck on my 21st birthday. You know, so I started in this industry as soon as I could. I drove truck in the military. So I understand what it's like to be a young person who comes in this industry and how you got to kind of work your way and learn your way through the industry. And, you know, it can be pretty rough if you don't have some street smarts or you have people who have credit, because there's lots of people out here who are willing to take advantage of you. I understand what Lindsey was saying. Of course, you can come out of college and I'm a proponent of trucking, but I'm a proponent of more training, and it probably is going to cost more to do more training. But so these kids come out of here with a better idea of how to, whether it's a kid or somebody on a psychiatrist, better handle the equipment and run the equipment and know what they're doing. But the thing we forget, a lot of times it's lost in this, is that liberal arts students making $40,000 a year. Entry level truckers 50 to 60 maybe, if they're lucky. But they're working 70 hours a week, not 40 hours a week. And that gets lost a lot. They're also usually getting paid for everything they do for their job, where in trucking, you don't. You know, you give so much time away with shippers and receivers. And we need to reach out, one, to make the message good about trucking. I mean, I love trucking. I love it. There's nothing I've ever wanted to do. It's all, I love it. I have a passion for it. But I do understand the problems. And we as an industry have to first admit to ourselves the problems and work on fixing them if we really want to make this job attractive. And one of those other things we need to do is by reaching out to our shippers and our receivers and those communities to get them to load the trucks, so we're not having all this time given away and wasted time and detention time. I mean, I say it all the time. Who wants to come out here and give away 20 hours a week, spend every night trying to find a safe place to park or shutting down early and not get paid time and a half when they're working 70 hours a week and miss their family? That's why this is not a exciting career. We got lots and lots of people coming into it every year. The problem, they don't stay and get what they need. And it's because they come in here and they think, and it's not against anybody, they get told how great this is going to be and all this stuff and see all these things. And it is cool. It's cool to think I'm going to get to drive this truck and go everywhere and see everything, because it's a cool career. It's a cool job. But all this other stuff, paying your dues in trucking is very hard. And I tell people, young people, if you come in here, you got to take a job. It's not going to be the best. You've got to earn your stripes. Young people today, I don't think they like to earn their stripes as much as what we had to. It's a different mindset. And I get it. I don't blame them in a lot of ways. But you have to, and after a year or two, if you can keep yourself safety clean and not getting tickets, you can write your own destiny then, because there's private fleets and LTL carriers and stuff where you can really get a good gig. But it's that first 2 years that's just so hard. And for some it's hard even after that. But again, our industry needs to do a lot of self-reflection and self-repair to really become an attractive, sexy job.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll jump in on that note because I think that's right. We right now in this industry have about a 90% turnover rate. Most any other industry would look at that as just god awful. That's technically better. When I got into trucking in January of '06, the industry rate was about 120%. But I don't look at that 90% as a win. It's just a little bit better. We got to do a much better job of creating consistency and compensation. It is very hard for a driver, as an example, to make $600 one week, then $1,800, then $600, then $50. You can't budget for that, especially if it's not just you're supporting, but let's say you're 45 and you have 2 kids and you have a spouse and you have a dog in the white picket fence. It's very hard to budget in that lifestyle, let alone being gone while your family's stressed out that you're gone. So the challenge that we have as an industry right now is that we have to do a much better job of creating stability and consistency and a clear career path. Some companies are doing better than others. Part of that comes into the relationship with the shipper. Part of that comes in, quite frankly, about being honest and calling your baby ugly and aggressively addressing it. One of the things that I was fortunate to do early in my career, I was working with an owner-operator or asset-light-based company out of the Atlanta metro area, and they had a turnover rate of about 27%. And I saw a driver get up and leave orientation, and I watched the owner of the company at that time, a 72-year-old woman, run across the parking lot to see what was wrong, why the driver was upset. And I go, that's why this company has a 27% turnover. You have a 72-year-old woman sprinting across the street to find out what she can do for this owner operator. We have to have that urgency. A lot of people have this idea that we have a driver shortage in this industry. We do, but I would say it's more of a seasonal shortage. Your flatbedders complain about a shortage in the summertime. Your dry van complains in November and December that they have a shortage. In January, magically, the shortage disappears. We have a driver churn issue that we have to address, that as long as 80% of the industry continues to cycle, it exacerbates the problem. And so I think from a carrier level, I don't care if you have 5 trucks or you have 25,000 trucks. You cannot be satisfied with that. If you had office turnover of 90%, you would panic. You'd immediately go, we have a problem here. But out of sight, out of mind, if the driver's not visible and all of a sudden you have a 90% turnover, you have to have the same panic as though your coworker right next door quit on you. That's something that we have to address. I think we're, as an organization, making strides. So I'm happy to share something. As an example, our inexperienced driver turnover is about 30%. By industry standards, that's really good. We're not really happy with that and want to get that cut down, about half of that within a year. But you have to aggressively pursue it. And when I talk to a lot of companies as far as their turnover, if you don't hire enough drivers, I ask, hey, if someone doesn't hire enough drivers, who gets fired? They generally can point to somebody really quick. I go, when too many people quit you and leave your company, who gets fired? And all of a sudden the fingers come down because no one has ownership of it. That is one of those things as an industry that we have to treat the recruiting end. Like we give that urgency to the recruiting end, we have to treat the retention end with that exact same urgency and drive and spend. If we don't do that, we'll probably be having a similar discussion with you on here in about 5 years.
Absolutely. And just a reminder to anybody watching, if you have questions for any of the panelists, feel free to put those in the chat. We can get those answered in a couple of minutes. I think it's a great point that both you, Lewie, and Robert brought up about retention, because recruitment is just one piece of the puzzle, right? Retention is such an important part of this too. Lindsey, what do you think? Is it a driver shortage, a turnover issue, a retention problem? Where's the root of all of this?
I mean, I kind of like what Robert had to say when he was like, it's a little bit of everything. I mean, I do think we have an aging workforce. I think young people don't really know about the industry. And I think that we need to educate them about that. But I think we need to make the job better. We need to figure out how to retain drivers. We need to figure out how shippers and the suppliers can help to make the job better? How can they help with the wait times? How can they help make sure bathrooms are available for drivers? We have to put pressure on those shippers to help make the job better. I think that we've built a culture of them being the boss and allowing them to treat people and drivers the way they are. And that's terrible. They need to treat drivers like their family, right? Their friends, and they want them to succeed and they want to help them. So how can we do that to really make this better environment?
Absolutely. And Lewie, what are your thoughts? Turnover issue, driver shortage?
There's no driver shortage. There's never been a driver shortage. That's been a false narrative for 40 years or longer to keep wages down, drivers suppressed. I would say there is a shortage of experienced drivers, as Robert said, or seasoned drivers. There's definitely because of the turnover. But when you have a 90% turnover in industry, you don't have a shortage. There's plenty of proof out there. There's 400,000 to 500,000 new CDLs issued every single solitary year. They come in, they get burned up. And, as I've said many times, truckers are treated like cannon fodder. It's a shame. We need to invest. Our industry needs to spend as much time thinking about investing in the driver themselves as what they do in equipment and all this technology and all these other things that we can seem to be worried about. And, it's like I said, training. We start with training. It blows my mind the amount of times that I've sat on committees in states and different stuff when we're talking about we need to subsidize the training of truckers to get these people into our workforce, quickly and fastly, because right there you're throwing safety out the window and you're throwing the driver out the window because you're not investing in this person. We don't hear people say we need to hurry up and train people to be an electrician or make it affordable and easier to be an electrician or be a carpenter or be any of these other blue collar trades that they compete with. But trucking, for some reason, we got to figure out how to do it the cheapest, fastest way we can to get that person behind the wheel so we can pay them little of no money and they can run around the country and we don't have to invest in them. And we don't care if they leave because there's 10 more coming right behind them. And that's the wrong mindset. That's the wrong mindset for the person first and foremost, but it's the wrong mindset for highway safety as well. And that's where we don't recruit people because, trucking is a blue collar skilled job, competes against all these other blue collar trades out there. And most other blue collar trades, there's a pathway of benefits you grow as you work longer. The more experience you do in something, you become a boss, a supervisor, you get more benefit, whatever. In trucking, you can have 25 years, 2.5 million miles experience, just like I did, and you're treated just like the person who starts tomorrow. And so that makes it rough for people because people want to be treated different, and some of that should come on carrier level. Probably some of that needs to come on federal level. I don't understand for the life of me why a person like myself with 25 years experience, 2.5 million miles of safe driving, never had any problems. Why am I held to the same standards of hours of service and all these other things that somebody coming in off the streets held to? I've proved that I'm safe. I proved that I pay attention to what I'm doing and stuff. So, again, some of this needs to be dealt with, but some of this on a federal and state level too, with rules and regulations.
Definitely. And Lindsey, I know you've talked to a lot of different people on your podcast and a lot of different fleets. What's a big thing they're sort of missing about this conversation of recruitment and retention?
That's a good question. A lot of the people that we work with are very concerned about their drivers. They do a lot of things to appreciate their drivers and reward those 2 million safe drivers, right? And I think it's a lot of the people out there that aren't doing these things that we don't necessarily talk to. Most of the people that we talk to, they treat their drivers like family. They care about them. they want the best for them. They're trying to create tools and make sure that those drivers are successful. And so it's the companies out there that are churning drivers. Those are the ones that we really need to be concerned about. But I loved what Lewie had to say. It's bringing people into the industry slowly and investing in them and showing them different career paths. So it's not just, hey, here, get in a truck and go. It's what can we do to make them successful and help them stay retained in our industry and treat them as a person and not just a number that's going to try to help us make more money, right? We want to have employers that care about the people that are making their money, that making them money. We've got to care about them. They're people. So it's not just about the money. It's about the purpose, what the job is, and your legacy as a company, as a business owner. It's more of a holistic approach to the driver and not just they're there to serve that one purpose.
And Robert, you had mentioned earlier that your company was able to reduce turnover quite a bit. Are you also taking this sort of holistic approach that Lindsey mentioned, or what are some of the things you do early on in that driver's tenure that help them stay and be successful and really feel like they're heard as a person versus, just something to make money?
Yeah, the first 90 days is important, and more than any other time in a driver's life cycle as a company-based driver, but even some owner-operator experience under authority, same thing. The caveat in that 90 days is understanding the motivation for the job. Most people assume if I pay the most, I'm going to get the driver and I'm never going to have to worry about it. And that's not the case. Many people leave their last job for pay. Sometimes it's a lack of respect. Sometimes it's equipment. Sometimes it's geography and running area, and about 20 other things that it could be. It's educating the recruiter on the very first phone call so that they have the operational knowledge of the company to speak intelligently to a driver. I'll tell any recruiter that when you're recruiting a truck driver, if you don't sound like a schmuck, you're probably going to get a yes. Like if you literally know what you're talking about and have credibility and actually can explain to a driver how they will make money with you and how they'd lose money if they came to you and have that honest dialogue, you're going to stand out versus on average, 8 other recruiters a job seeker talks to in that process. That transition to an orientation and onboarding phase. Are you checking boxes, or is there a purpose to the orientation that you're welcoming them into the company? When they get to their dispatcher or fleet manager, when they get to operations, does that fleet manager have a fiduciary interest in that driver's success? Are they aligned so where that driver and fleet manager are literally judged on the same thing? Does the customer service and the sales part of the business talk with operations and talk to recruiting so those 3 functions are going down the same pathway? There's a lot of spinning plates, and the larger a company gets, communication tends to break down between those departments, and the victim of that tends to be the driver when that happens. The key is I don't care if you're 5 trucks, 100, 1,000, 20,000. If those functions don't communicate effectively to each other and are all in alignment singing from the same hymn sheet, the challenge that we face is the driver feels it before anyone else knows there's a problem. So you can be sitting in your office and think everything's great, but then all of a sudden you look and go, crap, I just had 10 people leave my company. You got a bigger problem. And the 10 people, they probably left for pretty consistent reasons. It may be pay, but it may be a number of other things. But you have to have the urgency to figure that out. That first 90 days, if you can get it to where that driver, so when I tell a driver how much they could make as an example, I don't tell them what my top 10% is because they're not going to hit that in their first 90 days. I'm very consistently about, hey, in the last 5 weeks, as an example, the job that you're going into, they made blank is the average and the median. I want to be realistic about how do you get on the top side of that? How do you get on the bottom side of that? Could I potentially recruit more people by prettying it up a little bit? Probably, but my turnover rate's going to go through the roof pretty quick. I need to have that honest dialogue here. I need to have a clear-cut value proposition for that driver. And then through that first 90 days, I need to deliver on any promises made. That breaks down at most companies. And we focus, like I said, as an industry, we focus really heavy about advertising, marketing, selling. But once they get through the door, we don't have that same urgency. And that's the problem. If you don't have that same urgency, you can't be surprised when you start feeding the beast, because what happens from a recruiting standpoint is you just keep ramping up what you're doing and exacerbating the problem without ever addressing it.
That's a great point. And what about something like technology? Is that playing a big role in that first 90 days and even before in the recruitment process, Robert?
Yes, both good and bad. And what I mean by that is this is still a relationship business. So we have a lot of technology in the truck. From a communication standpoint, we can utilize, as an example in the truck, the tablet. And it is a tool. It is a resource. But one of the things I will tell anybody is if you're a fleet manager, I still want to talk to the driver. I want to know the driver. I want to know what their motivations are. As I would tell any fleet manager, and I've dispatched in the past, I like knowing my drivers, their family, if they have a pet, what their motivation for getting home is. You can't necessarily do that through technology. And that's the one thing we have to be somewhat careful of, is we need to utilize technology to the fullest, but still not forget the fact that if you're going to win at trucking, this is a relationship business first and foremost. If you can't maintain a relationship, you're not going to succeed.
And Lindsey, what do you think? Are you seeing a lot of technology being used, especially recruiting some of these younger generations and in the retention process? And what's the right balance?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gen Z, this is the first generation that was literally born with an iPhone in their hand. So they don't remember a life without technology as one of the central points of their existence. I think that our industry has been doing a good job of bringing technology into the fold of things, whether it's in the truck or on the outside of the truck. And we continue to need to really help build the relationships face to face, but also what can we do to help drivers have a voice? And if they want that voice to be, be able to be out there with nobody knowing who's saying it, or if they want their uppers to know, hey, this is how I'm feeling. And so more and more companies, and that technology is out there and it exists, and more companies need to do that because we do need to give drivers a voice.
And Lewie, are you finding that some of the smaller carriers and the owner operators, do they have the tools and the technology to use those and recruit some of these younger generations, or what tactics are they using?
Yeah, I would say some do, some don't. A lot of our folks aren't the first to adapt technology or adapt the newer stuff. But a lot of our people are one truck owner operators too. So a lot of this technology and stuff that's out there is more fleet management tools. And, so they don't need fleet management tools. And so we see that. I think smartphones and some of that stuff went on that way. I go back to what Robert said, and technology is a great thing, but you still need that personal relationship. I think that means a lot. I've been to a couple conferences lately that say that these younger people are getting that since they were born with an iPhone in their hand, they're kind of getting over tech. They want to go back and to kind of, they've had too much of it. So, which I can understand that completely. I think technology, when I started, you would still pay phones and load boards on the TV screen in a truck stop. So, there's definitely been some great things that came from technology and your smartphone and being able to have in the world at your fingertips. But there's also been some bad as well. But I still think personal relationship, Robert hit it on the head, and with what his company and everybody talking to everybody and everybody knowing what's going on, because drivers aren't stupid. Drivers know what's going on. Drivers talk to each other. Drivers pay attention. I go back to, I remind people, Sam Walton, in Sam Walton's book, he learned more about his company from taking donuts to his drivers in the driver room in the morning and his stores than he did from anybody in his boardroom. So truckers know what's going on.
Yeah. And maybe a technology detox is in order.
Yeah.
We've got time for one last question. I'll start with you, Lewie. What excites you about the next generation of truck drivers?
I just think keeping your future alive and seeing what they come up with. Here at OOIDA, we're changing some things. I met a young man at Match who's was 31 years old. He's been trucking for 10 years, and he's like super excited and loves trucking. And you get out to some of these events, and there's still a big love for our industry. There's still a big love for the roots of our industry. And I think if treated right, I think the good thing about younger people, they're not as dumb as the us that are in this industry now, because part of the reason our industry is in the shape it is our own fault, because we're willing to work, we're willing to sit around warehouses forever. We're willing to put up with wondering where we're going to sleep every night because of the parking shortage. And we've never said enough's enough. And so, and I'm just as much to blame as every other trucker out there. I think younger people they're not going to put up with that. They don't want that. They want a good work balance life. They don't want to be gone from home for weeks on end like the rest of, maybe we didn't want to be, but we were just because we took it. So I think that if industry can do some self-reflecting and take the time to fix some of the problems, the federal government can do some of the things they need to do and allow these new people to come in. We can really make trucking sexy again and make it a worthwhile, make what it was in the 50s and the 60s. What I'll leave you with, go to YouTube sometime and watch videos on trucking from the 50s and the 60s especially, and even the late 40s that they used to do in movies about, not like documentary things, or talking about truck. And look how truckers are held. They are held up on a pedestal. Yeah. Drivers for fleets and their profession and their ability. Somewhere from the late 60s to now, we lost that. Truckers are down here, but go watch those videos. And I think the next generation, if given the right tools, they can become the knights of the road again.
Robert, in 30 seconds, what excites you about the next generation of trucking?
Pilots and truck drivers have more and more in common every single day. A lot of people get worried about technology and AI and self-driving trucks and all sorts of stuff. The driver is going to be in the truck for many, 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 many years to come. They're not getting replaced by technology. Technology will assist them in the process. And I see your average truck driver having more in common with a pilot for American Airlines than with any other blue-collar profession. They're going to be an expert from front to back, top to bottom of the truck, the freight, the equipment, the lane. And I see the respect that pilots get in another industry passing on to truck drivers.
And Lindsey, final word, what excites you about the next generation of truck drivers?
So I think that the message and what we do as an industry really aligns with the values of Gen Z. Gen Z, they want to be a part of something bigger that makes a difference. And we know without trucks, our world literally falls apart. They care about technology. They want to see the world. It's kind of like a tiny living in a tiny home, right? But I had a meeting the other day with a driver instructor, and he got his CDL in his early 20s, and he had never left Wisconsin before then. And now he's seen 49 states. So the opportunity that we're giving these young people in our industry to make a good living, to work hard, and to have something that they can be proud about is something we need to all get behind. And it's all about making the job better, making it sexier, making the industry better, and supporting drivers, supporting young people getting into the industry. It's a holistic approach that we need to take, and we all need to work together as an industry to do this.
Definitely. Well, thank you all so much for this really great conversation. I think there's lots of great takeaways about retention, recruiting, and how we can just make the profession a little bit more appealing, go back to those days of the 50s and 60s when truck driving was really glorious. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you to everybody who watched, and I hope that you took some great insights away from this webinar.